Hey guys, tonight we're setting foot, barefoot mind you, onto the cobbled, chaotic streets of ancient Rome. The sky is still dark, the air is thick with chimney smoke, and you're blinking into the oily half-light of a world that smells vaguely of goat hair and old socks. You're curled on a straw mattress in a creaky wooden insula, basically a Roman apartment block built by people who thought fire safety was just a funny Greek myth. You're not the only one waking up. Outside, a chorus of voices is already rising. Vendors yelling about yesterday's fish as if it were this morning's treasure. A woman shrieking at a runaway child, and someone hammering something with dramatic intent. And then, of course, the sewage cart rattles by. Rome, after all, is a city built on layers of marble, myth, and refuse. You didn't die in your sleep, which is lucky. These buildings collapse more often than you'd think. Historians still argue whether some of Rome's worst tenement fires were accidental or, let's say, encouraged by landlords keen on new tenants. You shuffle to the open window, more of a hole in the wall, and breathe in deeply. Mistake. What hits your nostrils is a dizzying cocktail of public urinals, donkey sweat, charcoal fumes, and boiled cabbage. Somewhere below, a man hawks pickled dormice for breakfast, and you briefly contemplate whether vomiting is considered un-Roman. The apartment is cramped, with low ceilings and even lower hygiene standards. The family you're crashing with, you met them 5 hours ago after getting lost near the baths, are already bustling. The father, let's call him Lucius, is shouting about his missing sandal while his son plays with what appears to be a taxidermied weasel. You're offered a clay cup of water that looks suspiciously murky. You pretend to sip and make a mental note to boil everything before touching it. As you reach for your tunic, damp, slightly moldy but wearable, you hear the unmistakable sound of a neighbor emptying their chamber pot out the window. You flinch and duck just in time. Timing is everything in Rome. They say the early bird gets the worm, but here, the early riser avoids the waste splash. There's no privacy, no comfort, and definitely no morning yoga. You'd kill for a hot shower, but instead, you're navigating splintery stairs and trying not to trip over an elderly woman shouting something about turnip prices. At street level, you step outside and instantly regret it. The ground squelches under your feet, not with mud, but something more mysterious and pungent. The sun hasn't risen fully yet, but already you feel a sheen of sweat and grime beginning to build on your skin. Children run past you carrying live chickens, and a dog with 3 legs barks at you suspiciously. You glance up and see laundry, lines sagging between buildings. A toga is flapping like a surrender flag. Somewhere, a donkey brays as if giving commentary on your general confusion. A pair of soldiers march past, armor clanking, eyes sharp. You instinctively try to look casual, which in your case involves awkwardly adjusting your tunic and leaning on a wall that turns out to be sticky. One soldier snorts. "Tourist," he mutters in Latin. You understand him anyway. Already, you're sweating through your layers, your sandals pinch, and your stomach is beginning to make mournful gurgling sounds. Your brain is still waking up, but your body is already asking, how much longer do we have to survive this? Let's not. Forget the building you just emerged from was likely assembled with the architectural equivalent of duct tape and prayers. Roman insulae were notorious for poor construction. Multi-storied and densely packed, they frequently caught fire, collapsed, or occasionally did both. And of course, the higher you lived, the cheaper your rent, and the greater your odds of becoming one with the rubble. It's hard to believe that this bustling, cacophonous mess is the heart of a world empire. You might be imagining gleaming white marble columns and noble senators in spotless togas quoting Cicero. Instead, you're witnessing a city that's loud, chaotic, unwashed, and somehow still impressive in its sheer scale and nerve. Welcome to ancient Rome. You're not even out of your street yet, and it's already too much. And you know what? You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your city and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take a deep breath, not that it helps, and start to shuffle forward. Time to find a toilet, and trust me, you won't like what's waiting. You follow the sound of sloshing water and groggy complaints down the narrow alley, guided by nothing more than hope and the general stink of civilization. You're looking for a toilet. You might think, how bad could it be? But this is ancient Rome, and the answer is far, far worse than you're expecting. The first thing you should know is that Roman public toilets, latrini, were marvels of engineering, civic life, and poor judgment. You locate one tucked between a bakery and a shrine to a very tired-looking Mercury. Inside, the stone benches have evenly spaced holes, and a shallow stream of water trickles beneath, designed to carry everything downstream. A man in a grimy tunic nods at you as he shuffles out, whistling and patting his belly. That's the only cheerful part. You lower yourself onto the cold marble slab. Yes, you're doing this. And stare at the person next to you. Because yes, someone is always next to you. Privacy? Not a Roman concept. You're elbow to elbow with a stranger who's telling you in detail about his cousin's hemorrhoids. You want to nod politely, but you're too busy trying not to touch the seat with more than absolutely necessary. The marble is surprisingly smooth, possibly because millions of... well, never mind. Then comes the sponge. Not a roll of paper in sight, just a communal sponge on a stick, resting in a bucket of vinegary water. You look at it. It looks at you. You both regret this. Romans were proud of their hygiene, but shared sponge doesn't scream sanitation. Historians still argue whether these sponges were cleaned thoroughly or just marinated. You try to leave quickly, but an elderly man named Publius strikes up a conversation about gladiator betting odds. He's still talking as you edge sideways. Toward the door, trousers not quite secure. You mumble an excuse about sacrificial duties and flee. You emerge back into the street feeling less like a citizen of the empire and more like a survivor of an elaborate prank. But hey, now your bladder's empty, which is the high point of your morning. You pause to wash your hands at a public fountain. Thank Jupiter for aqueducts. But even the trickle of water feels mildly suspicious. Someone's dog is using the same basin as a bath. Roman sanitation is a paradox. On the one hand, this city boasts aqueducts, sewers, and complex drainage systems. On the other hand, people regularly toss buckets of excrement from upper floors with no warning. Streets are technically cleaned, but mostly by pigs, rain, or time. You notice a sign urging residents to use the latrines, not the alleys, written in Latin but in what can only be described as passive-aggressive graffiti. A cart rattles past, its wheels splashing through something unmentionable. You hop sideways to avoid a spray and immediately regret stepping into a puddle that squishes underfoot. You try to tell yourself it's just water. You fail. You're also beginning to notice something else. This place is noisy. Your ears are constantly assaulted by vendors, children, barking animals, and the slap of sandals on stone. Somewhere nearby, someone's playing panpipes badly, and over it all, a street orator is shouting about grain prices and political corruption. So nothing's changed in 2,000 years. Desperate for a reset, you detour into a side alley, hoping for a bit of calm. Instead, you encounter a man, relieving himself against a statue of Minerva. He waves at you cheerfully. You wave back, because honestly, what else can you do? You're starting to realize that surviving a single morning in Rome isn't about understanding history. It's about navigating a society that thinks drainage means a hole near your feet, and that shouting louder makes things more correct. You long for soap, silence, and maybe a chair that doesn't double as a toilet seat. Oh, and if you're wondering, women had it worse. Most latrines were technically open to all, but in practice, modesty and social norms meant women often had to go at odd hours or in riskier places. Wealthier homes had private latrines, but even those weren't much cleaner. There's some debate among scholars as to whether Roman women used separate sponges or shared the same grim communal experience. Either way, it's a lose-lose situation involving vinegar water and trust issues. As you rejoin the main street, you spot a group of schoolboys giggling as they run from a shop, having apparently swapped a merchant's olives with dung pellets. The merchant chases them with a broom, shouting words your Latin tutor never taught you. You try not to trip over a tortoise someone's keeping as a pet or dinner. It's hard to tell in Rome. Everything is both decoration and potential snack. By the time you glance up at the sun's slow rise, casting a dull glow on the stone columns and balconies above, you're already exhausted. Your stomach is growling. You haven't even eaten yet. And you still smell faintly of vinegar sponge. It's going to be a long day. You finally escape the latrine experience, physically intact but spiritually frayed, and make your way back onto the main street. It's time for breakfast, which in ancient Rome is charmingly known as ientaculum. This sounds pleasant and noble, perhaps like a light pastry accompanied by flute music. But in reality, it's a small, sad offering to your stomach, more ceremonial than satisfying. You're handed a hunk of coarse bread, yesterday's if you're lucky, last week's if you're not, and a cup of wine that tastes like someone soaked it in a wooden floorboard. It's thin, sour, and weirdly warm. Roman wine is usually mixed with water, spices, sometimes herbs, and occasionally, horrifyingly, seawater. Scholars still debate whether this was for flavor, preservation, or just the sheer thrill of gastrointestinal roulette. A street vendor ladles out something he claims is porridge, but it looks more like wallpaper paste with suspicious flecks. Barley and cheese, he shouts with pride, as though that combination should excite you. You take a cautious spoonful. It's cold, clumpy, and seems to be staring back. You consider going hungry, but your stomach objects with the voice of a vengeful god. You scan the options. A man nearby is gnawing on a fig stuffed with fish. No one seems sure. Another is selling pine nuts out of a dirty cloth, while a cheerful older woman offers what she insists are fresh eggs from a basket that smells strongly of not fresh. You buy one anyway, crack it open, and discover it's been hard-boiled, to the consistency of chalk and depression. And yet, this is perfectly normal. Romans didn't go in for luxurious breakfasts. That was for the Greeks or the very rich. For the average citizen, or in your case, the unregistered, confused time tourist, breakfast is meant to be fast, forgettable, and ideally, non-lethal. You try to eat while leaning against a wall, but someone tells you that's considered uncivilized. Eating on the go, or standing, was frowned upon. Meals were a social thing, so now you're supposed to crouch awkwardly in a shadowy doorway, nibbling. Stale barley biscuit while pretending this is a cultural experience. A passing legionary glares at your posture. You nod solemnly and pretend to be praying. He seems satisfied. Your stomach, however, remains unconvinced. It's gurgling louder than a senator in the forum. You chew slowly, trying to remember when your last normal meal was. Something with spices, or a vegetable, or hope. You spot a group of children digging into a basket of dates, sticky-faced and barefoot. One throws a half-eaten fruit at your sandal and grins. You decide not to retaliate because he's probably faster, and frankly, he looks like he could shank you with a chicken bone. Further down the street, a baker is pulling flatbread from a clay oven, and for a brief moment, the scent of warm crust and sesame distracts you from your suffering. You move toward him like a pilgrim seeking salvation. The baker eyes you warily. 2 asses, he says, holding up the bread. You reach for your coin pouch, and remember it's been empty since the puppet show incident you haven't had yet but will later. You offer a button. He throws it at your head. You retreat, both shamed and hungry, clutching your original chunk of dry bread like it's treasure. You glance around. Everyone else seems to be handling this just fine. People are eating figs, dipping bread into olive paste, chatting, even laughing. You, on the other hand, look like a dehydrated statue wrapped in a thrift store curtain. There's a loud bray as a donkey knocks over a table of lentils. The seller screams, the donkey trots off triumphantly, and a group of loitering teenagers cheer. One of them offers you a roasted locust. You decline. barely. Back in the day, the wealthier classes might enjoy a breakfast of eggs, honey, or fancy, imported fruits. But for the common crowd, it's whatever's left over, still edible, and not currently being fought over by a goose. There's even evidence that some Romans skipped breakfast altogether, perhaps out of stoicism, perhaps out of realistic expectations. Historians still argue whether breakfast had real cultural importance, or was just a necessity for people doing physical labor. Either way, no one here seems particularly thrilled about it. You gnaw the edge of your bread and reflect on how little you've accomplished. You've used the worst toilet imaginable, almost died of food disappointment, and it's still barely mid-morning. There's no coffee, no cereal, no cinnamon rolls. The only crunch you get is from possibly sand in your barley. You finally finish your meal and sigh deeply. A nearby goat mimics the sound, and for a moment, you share a look of mutual dismay. You consider eating your own sandal, but decide against it. Too chewy. You brush off your tunic, feeling slightly stickier than before, and prepare to brave the city once more. Maybe things will get better. Maybe Rome will reveal its marvels, its wonders, its eternal beauty. Or maybe you'll try crossing the street and get flattened by a runaway vegetable cart. You step back onto the uneven cobblestones with a belly full of regret and breadcrumbs, determined to keep moving. Your next challenge? Something seemingly simple. Crossing the street. It sounds easy enough. But ancient Roman roads, while brilliant feats of engineering, were not designed for the comfort of pedestrians, especially ones who are wearing soft modern feet and a hunted expression. You stand at the edge of the via, watching as ox carts clatter by with alarming speed. One driver yells something incomprehensible and points at a chicken that may or may not have the right of way. The chicken seems unconcerned. It waddles into traffic like it owns the republic. The road is slick, probably from a combination of water, wine, and things best left unidentified. You eye the raised stepping stones, a genius Roman invention that lets you cross while mostly avoiding the muck. But to get from one to the next requires the agility of a mountain goat and the timing of a trained charioteer. You go for it. You leap. Your sandal lands with a squelch on a patch of what you pray is just olive brine. Behind you, a donkey snorts in judgment. Ahead of you, a cart barrels toward your kneecaps. You dodge, almost fall, and finally land on the other side of the street with your dignity in shreds and your tunic stuck to your leg. You made it. Barely. You lean against a column to catch your breath and reconsider your life choices. In Rome, streets weren't just for walking. They were also sewers, marketplaces, hangout spots, and occasionally gladiator training arenas, if the rumors are true. Scholars still debate whether the average Roman viewed streets as public property or dangerous obstacle courses. While recovering, you spot a man brushing horse manure off his sandals with a scroll. He meets your eyes and shrugs, as if to say, "This is just how we live." A fishmonger walks by, swinging two suspiciously still eels and humming a tune that sounds like bad luck. You step aside to avoid him and nearly topple into a fruit stall. The vendor scowls but offers you a bruised pomegranate with what might be pity or sarcasm. You decline, though the fruit looks better than breakfast did. Crossing one Roman street has already taken 5 minutes, cost you a patch of sandal leather, and added new stains to your tunic. You try to shake off the experience and keep walking, but not too confidently. The streets of Rome are full of surprises. Take the pigs, for example. Yes, pigs. They roam freely, snuffling for scraps and occasionally stealing laundry. A plump one trots past you, trailing a sock and looking smug. A child chases after it, brandishing a spoon like a sword. A moment later, you hear the sharp clink of metal. 2 helmeted soldiers are arguing with a cart driver over whether his wheels are too wide for the road. Regulations exist, supposedly, but enforcement appears to rely on volume and threats of divine punishment. The soldiers move on, muttering about someone named Gaius and a broken axle. You try to make your way toward the forum, assuming, wrongly, that it will be more orderly. But first, you must navigate a construction site. A crew of slaves is repairing a wall using mortar, bricks, and something that might be shredded linen. One is singing, another is asleep, and a third throws a rock at a passing cat. You detour, nearly tripping over a man selling wax tablets, then duck as a hanging sign above you creaks ominously. Romans were inventive, but not always cautious. Collapsing signage is just another local hazard. As you finally near the forum's edge, you pause at a crosswalk, yes, the raised stepping stones again, and hesitate. On the far side, a woman is trying to calm a runaway mule while her child throws figs at a mime. You time your dash, leap once more, and make it, except for your right sandal, which remains behind, suctioned to the stone like a forgotten offering to the gods. You hop back, retrieve it with a slurp that echoes far too loudly, and limp forward, covered in mystery splatter and a thin coating of urban dust. You find a quiet spot on a bench, if quiet means within yelling distance of two cabbage vendors and a man playing the lyre poorly. You breathe, in, out, inhale Rome, regret it. Try again through your mouth this time. Some historians argue Rome was the most advanced urban environment of its time, and they're not wrong. But they also didn't have to cross the street barefoot in rush hour while dodging donkeys, disgruntled grandmothers, and flying garum jars, and you still haven't even made it to your errand for the day. As you scrape an unidentifiable substance from your hem, you hear a poet in the distance loudly reciting something tragic about lost love and bad figs. You close your eyes. Maybe this is all a dream. Maybe you'll wake up in your own bed, far from the chaos of this marble-clad madness. Or maybe you'll open your eyes and realize you're due to meet your landlord in 5 minutes, and you're already late. You limp your way down a side alley, cradling your bruised sandal and your bruised dignity. It's time for a rendezvous with your Roman landlord, a man whose soul appears to be made of cracked stone, fermented fish sauce, and overdue rent notices. Your building, if one can call that fire trap a building and not vertical kindling, has seen better centuries. As you approach, you spot him already waiting, arms crossed, lips pursed in that universal expression of, "You owe me money." His name is Sextus. His breath smells like boiled onions, and his tunic is aggressively mustard-colored. "Ah, the tenant returns," he says, voice slick as old oil. "Still alive, I see." You nod sheepishly, then realize nodding looks guilty. So you shrug. That looks worse. He narrows his eyes. Behind him, a small portion of the wall cracks and falls off, landing near a cat that doesn't flinch. You both ignore it. Sextus is already launching into a monologue about property taxes, leaky cisterns, and certain individuals who forget to pay on the kalends. You don't even know what day it is, or what a kalends is. But your best bet is to look remorseful and occasionally mutter, "Very troubling." You point to the gaping crack in the stairwell arch. Sextus waves it off. "It adds character," he says. You're not convinced. Neither is the rat poking its head through the gap. He casually mentions that, for a small extra fee, he cannot report you to the local e-dial for excessive foot traffic. You ask what that even means. He smiles with all the warmth of a basilisk. "Exactly, this is Rome. Everything's negotiable, especially if you have coin." You, however, have a half-melted wax tablet and some barley crumbs in your pocket. So, when Sextus suggests you settle your debt by helping him deliver an amphora of garum to a friend, you agree before thinking it through. You follow him into a rear storage area that smells like death and anchovies had a baby. Garum, the beloved fermented fish sauce of the Romans, is potent enough to remove paint from walls, or in this case, your will to live. He hands you a sealed amphora and a cloth to wrap around it. "Don't drop it," he says, "or breathe too deeply." You stumble back outside, jar in hand, feeling like a low-budget Hercules on an unpleasant quest. Your destination is 4 blocks away, which sounds simple until you realize that Roman blocks don't follow any logical grid, and half the street signs have been chipped off by vandalism or earthquakes. As you wander, trying to ignore the steadily warming jar of fish paste pressing into your ribs, You marvel again at how quickly Rome can turn from impressive to alarming. A grand column looms above a shop selling suspicious mushrooms. A noblewoman passes by in a litter carried by 4 sweating slaves. She fans herself while making eye contact with no one. A man juggling figs winks at you and drops one on your foot. You finally reach your target. A small domus with a cracked mosaic of Neptune on the floor and a sleepy-looking doorman chewing what appears to be fennel root. He eyes your amphora, nods solemnly, and waves you inside. Delivery successful. No tips, of course. On your way out, you pass by a pair of city officials inspecting a neighbor's home for code violations. You hear the words, unstable beam, illegal skylight, and definitely cursed. You decide to walk faster. Returning to your building, Sextus is gone, but he's helpfully scratched rent due into your door with what might be a stylus or a claw. You sigh. The city may be eternal, but your patience has a hard expiration date. Still, even as you mop your brow with a piece of fraying cloth and rub the fish sauce smell off your forearms, you can't help but admire how resilient Romans must have been. Renting here isn't just about shelter. It's about surviving bad infrastructure, opportunistic landlords, and the faint chance of waking up buried under rubble. Historians still argue whether insular tenants had any meaningful legal protections. Sure, there were laws on the books, but enforcement was spotty at best. And most renters had less recourse than the neighborhood's stray dogs. You think longingly of security deposits, maintenance teams, and buildings that don't catch fire when someone sneezes too hard. Rome's urban sprawl is vibrant, yes, but it's also held together with optimism and string. You settle onto your room's splintered stool, still warm from the sun, and hear the soft creak of your ceiling as someone above you stumbles home. There's a shout, a crash, and a shower of dust. You don't look up. You just hold your breath and count slowly to 10. And then, when it's quiet again, you laugh. A tired, nervous, fish-scented laugh. Because you're starting to realize you really truly probably won't survive this. Probably won't. You wake up from your brief sitting nap, a luxury in ancient Rome, and realize you still aren't dressed properly. Your tunic is clinging to your back, soaked with sweat and scented lightly with despair. It's time to tackle the next indignity of Roman daily life, getting dressed. You had hoped to blend in, but Rome has rules, dress codes, expectations, social customs, and like most things here, they are simultaneously rigid and deeply confusing. Let's start with the basics. You're wearing a tunica, which is fine for a pleb, a freedman, or anyone who doesn't want to attract attention. But if you're trying to seem respectable, or merely trying to avoid another glare from that wine merchant, you'll need something more, a toga. You've seen pictures, maybe even movies. You think it's just a stylish sheet draped artfully over one shoulder, and oh, how wrong you are. A proper Roman toga is between 12 and 18 feet long, made of heavy wool, and shaped like a semicircle that you are expected to fold, pleat, and balance into a wearable swirl of fabric without stabbing yourself in the foot. There's no clasp, no buttons, no instruction manual. You borrow one from your host family. Lucius insists this is your chance to appear honorable. The toga smells faintly of old cheese and damp walls, but you thank him anyway. You then spend 35 excruciating minutes trying to wrap yourself in it. Every time you think you've got it, a corner slips, a fold collapses, or the whole thing tries to turn into a noose. Eventually, Lucius's mother takes pity on you and arranges it herself. You now resemble a lumpy, overheating burrito. You can barely move your arms, and sitting down feels like an act of war. But you are now technically respectable. The weight is immediate. It drapes across your shoulder like punishment. You shuffle forward, feeling more like a haunted statue than a person. No wonder statues wear togas. They don't have to walk in them. And gods forbid you're of senatorial class, or just pretending. Because then, your toga needs to include a broad purple stripe called the latus clavus, woven by someone who probably charged a fortune for it. You're not sure if this counts as cosplay or felony. but you avoid eye contact with everyone just in case. Also, there are color codes. White is for everyday use. Dull purple for candidates running for office. Toga candida, hence candidate. Deep purple for emperors. Black for mourning. If you get it wrong, best case, people laugh. Worst case, someone accuses you of impersonating Caesar. You don't want that. Not again. Historians still argue whether the toga was meant to promote dignity or simply make it impossible to fight, flee, or dance. It's a garment that commands respect, but mostly because anyone wearing one is clearly suffering. You glance around. Roman women have their own fashion gauntlet. Many wear a stola over their tunic, a long sleeveless dress signifying marital status, and presumably the ability to walk without tripping on a hem. Some women wear elaborate hairstyles involving multiple braids, pins, and possibly scaffolding. A passing matron's hairdo could support birds if necessary. The lower classes skip the fuss entirely. Labourers, shopkeepers, and porters wear short tunics or even go bare-chested in the heat. Children often run around with minimal clothing and maximum volume. Slaves wear what they're given, which may be little more than a rag and sandals made, from repurposed disappointment. You, however, are now swaddled in wool and radiating sweat. The toga itches. It itches in places that haven't itched since middle school. You adjust a pleat and nearly drop your coin pouch. Again. A man approaches you. You panic. Did he recognize you as the person who failed to barter correctly for olives earlier? No, he just wants directions to the Subura. You nod solemnly and point in a random direction. He thanks you. You feel strangely powerful. You try to sit on a bench. The toga rebels. It bunches and folds like a misbehaving accordion. You give up and choose to lean against a wall, once again sticky. The garment is also absorbing that. You look up and see a nobleman stride by, his toga pristine and flowing like he has a dedicated folding staff. He does. You, on the other hand, look like a bed that made itself. Still, people are starting to give you more respectful nods, mostly out of sympathy, you suspect. A boy selling sausages laughs at your silhouette and calls you toga pile. You wave back with what little dignity you can muster. As the day warms, so does the fabric. It clings. It traps heat. It has its own climate system. You wonder if Romans ever just gave up and wore nothing. They did, occasionally, but usually at the baths. And that's a horror for later. For now, you are dressed. You are technically Roman, and you are exactly one strong breeze away from indecent exposure. Congratulations. You shuffle through the streets, arms semi-pinned by your toga, like you've lost a bet with a curtain, wondering what people in ancient Rome actually do all day. You're quickly learning that surviving here requires one crucial thing: a job, or at least something that looks enough like labor to avoid being mistaken for a vagrant, an idler, or worse, an actor. Lucius, the man who so generously offered you lodging and lukewarm eggs, suggests you try your hand as a scribe. You can read, can't you? He asks. You nod, perhaps too confidently. Reading Latin in theory and reading Roman cursive in real life are not the same. It's less neat lines on parchment and more angry spaghetti on wax. You're escorted to a small room in the back of a shop, dimly lit by a window so narrow it might just be a crack in the wall. A man named Marcus hands you a stylus, a wax tablet, and a scroll of dictation. He speaks quickly. You understand every third word. Something about grain tallies and shipments from Hispania. You press stylus. To wax. It squeaks. You wince. It feels like writing on the back of a damp turtle. Within 10 minutes, your hand cramps. Within 20, your back is curled like a walnut. Marcus glances over your shoulder, squints, and mutters, "Barbarian scrawl." You smile weakly and keep going. Historians still argue whether Roman scribes were well-respected specialists or simply the caffeine-deprived interns of the ancient world. All you know is your eyes are blurring. Your toga is slowly consuming your chair, and you've spelled fish sauce 3 different ways, all of them wrong. At lunch, Marcus offers you a break. Or, more precisely, he kicks you out for being too slow. You stagger outside and collapse on a water trough. An older man next to you is hacking away at a bundle of reeds, preparing brushes for another kind of writing job. "Try hauling," he says, pointing at the docks. You nod, because at this point, anything sounds better than squinting at wax. You make your way to the Tiber River, where a dozen men are grunting over amphorae, crates, and what appears to be an especially stubborn basket of onions. A foreman takes one look at you, frowns, and throws you a rope. "You haul, you eat," he says, and so you haul. You grip the rough hemp handles of a jug of olive oil and discover something amazing. It weighs more than your childhood regrets. You wobble forward, knees screaming, back locked, face contorted into a grimace that draws applause from a nearby goat. You make it 5 steps before slipping on a puddle of mystery fluid and landing squarely in it. No one helps. A boy points and says, "That's not even the heaviest one." You lie on the ground for a moment, contemplating whether death by embarrassment is historically accurate. You get back up. You try again. Eventually you find a rhythm. Lift, wobble, swear softly, set down. It's like CrossFit. If CrossFit also involved swearing in Latin and the constant fear of cholera, by the time the sun reaches its highest point, your arms feel like boiled reeds and your shoulder smells faintly of tuna. Someone hands you a crust of bread. It tastes like dust and triumph. You pause to look around. The riverside is bustling, traders shouting over the din, foreigners haggling in half a dozen tongues, fishermen gutting eels with alarming glee. You realize you're standing at the economic heart of the empire, and possibly on some eels. A man from Alexandria tells you. He's been unloading ships here for 12 years. He shows you the scars to prove it. Another offers you dried dates for a back rub. You decline. A third warns you not to touch anything that came from the cursed warehouse. You make a note to avoid all warehouses just to be safe. Eventually, your shift ends, not by clock, but by collapse. The foreman tosses you a coin the size of a grape and tells you not to come back unless you grow new muscles. You walk away with aching arms, a new blister the shape of Italy, and the haunting realization that Roman jobs are either boring, back-breaking, or both, and the toga, still on, still itching, still somehow heavier. You lean against a column, panting. In the distance, someone's shouting about a runaway donkey and another person is selling sausages from a cart that looks like it used to be a coffin. You've made it through one Roman workday, barely. With your muscles aching and your toga now behaving like a hostile blanket, you decide that you've earned a break. Lucius suggested earlier that the perfect way to unwind after laboring like a reluctant pack mule is a visit to the public baths. That sounds relaxing, clean, civil, maybe even peaceful. But as with everything else in ancient Rome, reality is not interested in meeting your expectations. You head toward the Thermae, navigating another gauntlet of screaming produce vendors and unsupervised poultry. When you arrive at the bath complex, the building itself is impressive. Vaulted arches, carved marble friezes, and enough columns to qualify as a forest. You pass under an archway that reads something like "Health Through Sweat," which would be comforting if not ominous. Inside, the frigidarium is your first stop, the cold room. The temperature slaps you in the face. You pretend not to shiver. Roman masculinity frowns on visible goosebumps. You strip down. Everyone else is wearing either very little or nothing at all, and stow your belongings with an attendant who looks like he's memorized the contents of your coin pouch. You enter the tepidarium, the warm room, and immediately feel like a damp sponge. Steam fills the air, mingling with the scents of olive oil, sweat, and old gossip. There are bodies everywhere, lounging, chatting, arguing about grain prices. Someone's clipping their toenails with a dagger. Another man is rubbing scented oil into his chest while reciting bad poetry. You try to blend in by looking unbothered. Instead, you slip slightly on an oiled tile and grab a passing stranger for balance. He glares. You apologize. In Latin, badly. From there, you're ushered into the caldarium, the hot room, where the temperature is akin to the inside of a boiling amphora. This is where you sweat out your sins, regrets, and any dreams of comfort. A man offers you a strigil, a curved metal scraper. You thank him and try to use it discreetly. The sound it makes scraping oil and grime from your back is unholy. Historians still argue whether strigils were hygienic or just smeared the filth around in more artistic patterns. You decide not to ask. A large man next to you starts humming and slapping his knees rhythmically. You think it's a song or a threat. You smile politely and pretend to enjoy the feeling of your pores turning into geysers. Someone tosses eucalyptus into a brazier, which is thoughtful until the smoke stings your eyes and you begin blinking, like a weeping statue. After what feels like an hour, you retreat back to the tepidarium and join a line of bathers waiting to be massaged with more oil. You expect something therapeutic. Instead, a bath attendant the size of a small temple grabs your shoulders and begins kneading you like bread dough. At one point, you're certain you black out from either relaxation or blunt force. You wake up on a marble bench next to a man whose name might be Claudius or possibly Cynthia. He talks quickly and switches subjects mid-sentence. He offers you wine from a communal cup. You accept, then remember your last encounter with communal anything. Still, the wine's not bad, and you finally start to feel that mythical Roman ease seep in. Then a boy runs by, yelling that someone dropped a tortoise in the pool. A group of teenagers is chasing it, slipping and colliding with an older man who spills oil everywhere. Chaos ensues. You inch away, pretending you're part of the furniture. Eventually, you head for the exit. You're pink from steam, slick with oil, and your feet look like boiled turnips. You reclaim your toga, which is somehow both heavier and more wrinkled than before. You attempt to re-wrap it and fail spectacularly. An old man tuts and folds it for you while insulting your ancestors in flawless hexameter. You step back into the street, squinting in the late afternoon sun. You are technically cleaner, but also coated in a mixture of other people's oil, sweat, and maybe poetry. You smell like rosemary and regret. Still, for a brief moment, you feel oddly content. Bathhouses were a great equalizer in Roman society. Rich and poor mingled here, gossiping, relaxing, and occasionally getting into slap fights over soap. They were more than places to bathe. They were social centres, business venues, and performance spaces. Some even had libraries and snack bars. You missed both. You turn the corner and spot a man selling fried chickpea patties. You hand over a coin, your last, and receive a warm, salty cake of deliciousness that crumbles in your fingers. You devour it in 2 bites. Finally, a Roman food victory. As you walk on, slightly less sticky and marginally more human, you consider that you might survive the day after all. And then you step directly into a street puddle full of garum runoff and lose your sandal again, You squelch forward, one sandal in hand, the other trailing a whiff of fermented fish sauce behind you. The city of Rome unfolds before you in all its chaotic, cacophonous, and olfactorily aggressive glory. You've bathed, barely. You've eaten, sort of. You've laboured, sweated, and earned the deep honour of being completely overwhelmed. And now, as the sun starts tipping westward, you become acutely aware of one inescapable fact. Rome smells. Not subtly, not romantically, not like basil and stone warmed by the sun. No, ancient Rome hits your nostrils like a philosopher's sock drawer left in a tanner's workshop. The sheer stink of the eternal city is, paradoxically, eternal. It's not that Romans were especially dirty. In fact, they were unusually obsessed with cleanliness. Public baths, perfumes, deodorized floor tiles. But when you cram 1 million people, thousands of animals, rotting vegetables, fish sauce factories, and absolutely zero functioning trash pickup into one city, well, the result is a miasma that could wilt bronze. You try to breathe shallowly as you pass a tannery. The air here is thick with the scent of urine, which was used in the leather softening process. You remind yourself, this is not a public urinal, even though it smells exactly like one. It's a place of commerce. Important economic work is being done here, with buckets of human waste and sheepskins. Capitalism. Just as you start to adjust, a strong breeze carries the distinctive perfume of foolery, a Roman laundry operation. They clean clothes here using fermented urine and clay, then stomp them out barefoot in vats. There's a guy currently doing the stomping. He waves at you, grinning, his calves glistening in a way that suggests soap was never invited to the party. You turn a corner too fast and walk directly into a fish sauce market. Garum. The word alone makes your stomach tighten. These giant clay jars are sun-warmed and open, filled with viscera, salt, and thyme. The smell is sharp, tangy, and vaguely accusing. One splash hits your ankle. You pretend not to cry. Historians still argue whether Roman cities ever truly achieved urban sanitation, or if everyone just built up a very strong tolerance. You, however, have been in Rome for under a day and already smell like a failed seafood experiment. Further down the street, a man is roasting chestnuts. Finally, something pleasant. You inhale deeply and instantly regret it, because the cart next door is selling rotting cabbage stew. The vendor claims it's medicinal. You believe him, in the same way you believe mushrooms can talk if you eat. Enough of them. A child runs by with a sack full of goat dung, which he flings gleefully into a compost heap. You give him a wide berth and a thumbs up. That compost heap, by the way, is next to a statue of Mars. He does not seem pleased. Your eyes begin to water, partly from the smell, partly from the smoke. Rome, you realize, is burning things constantly. Incense for rituals, coal for cooking, oil for lamps, random piles of garbage for unclear reasons. The haze clings to your toga. You now smell like a candle that gave up. You pause near a public fountain to wash your hands. A noble idea. The water flows from an aqueduct, crystal clear and cool. You rinse your fingers, splash your face. A pigeon promptly poops into the basin. You sigh and move on. A poet standing nearby is reciting verses about the city's glory. He includes the line, Rome, where the very air sings. You'd argue it more simmers, possibly curdles. But he seems sincere, and who are you to crush dreams? And yet, as your nose adjusts, and it does, you begin to notice more delicate odors hiding beneath the foulness. A woman walks past, her perfume wafting traces of rose and cinnamon. A bakery opens its shutters, releasing a wave of warm spelt, bread scent. A spice seller cracks open a sack of silphium, the now extinct wonder herb. It smells sharp, herbal, like something between fennel and garlic. You breathe it in and think, okay, that one's not bad. A breeze lifts your toga, briefly, undignified but refreshing, and carries to you the incense smoke of a nearby temple. It's subtle. Cedar, frankincense, maybe dried bay leaves. A moment later, you smell someone frying lark tongues in oil. The charm evaporates. Even temples aren't immune. You peek inside one dedicated to Venus and see offerings of flowers, bread, and what appears to be an expired octopus. You back away respectfully. Roman hygiene isn't entirely theoretical. Wealthier homes have indoor latrines. Streets technically have cloaca, underground sewers. Public fountains exist, but enforcement is spotty, and cleaning crews seem to operate on a deeply spiritual schedule, guided by omens and naps. You dodge a splash from an upper-story window. Another chamber pot emptied. No warning, no apology. Rome is vertical in every way, including how its waste flows. Still, Romans are oddly proud of their smells. They associate strong odors with vitality, virility, even piety. A pungent temple is a well-used one. A reeking tavern is clearly popular. A bathhouse that smells like socks and onions? Well, that's just community. You pass a mural that shows a bearded man holding his nose while standing above a sewer grate. A local child points and says, That's the god of drains. You're not sure if he's joking. By the time you reach the edge of the forum, your head is pounding, your senses are numb, and your sinuses may never recover. You perch on a stone plinth and let the aromas swirl past you like incense from a disobedient censer. Rome, it turns out, smells exactly like what it is: a teeming, thriving, overripe heart of an empire. It's garlic and guts, roses and rot, a feast and a compost heap. Civilization, served slightly warm, and you are breathing all of it. After surviving the olfactory assault of the fish sauce quarter and narrowly avoiding a pigeon-born baptism, your stomach growls again, low, mournful, insistent. It's time for lunch, or in proper Roman terms, prandium, the midday meal. A chance, perhaps, to finally taste something that doesn't double as a threat to your digestive tract. You approach a food stall run by a man named Flaccus, who wears a stained apron and the expression of someone who's been yelled at by senators and goats in equal measure. 2 asses for the special, he says without looking up. You fumble through your coin pouch and place a worn piece on the counter. He nods and hands you a wooden plate with something on it. You stare at it. It's a bean mash, lukewarm, grey, flecked with what might be herbs, or what might be crumbs from someone else's lunch. On the side, there's a small slice of salted lard that has begun to sweat in the sun, and for flair, a dollop of garum naturally. You take a tentative bite. The texture is soft, too soft, like bean-flavoured toothpaste. The flavour is not entirely bad, mostly bland, with a salty, slightly fishy zing that keeps bouncing around your mouth looking for something to complement. It finds nothing. Beside you, a child is gnawing on a skewer of something that may once have flown. A passing cart drops off more jars of pickled vegetables, which look angry and defiant in the brine. You wave away a wasp, sip from a clay cup, of vinegary wine, and try not to think about the sanitation policies in this particular stretch of street. Then someone offers you meritum, a paste of cheese, garlic, and herbs pounded in a mortar until it achieves the consistency of pungent cement. You spread a bit on your bread, bite in, and immediately discover why it was historically used both as food and insect repellent. Still, compared to your breakfast, this counts as a feast. A greasy, garlicky, possibly haunted feast. A man sits beside you. He's older, with a beard that contains its own ecosystem, and he begins lecturing you, without invitation, about the glories of cabbage. He claims it cures everything from joint pain to heartbreak. He's deeply invested in this belief. You nod politely while he offers you a bite of his boiled leaf. You decline. He insists. You cave. It's wet. It's floppy. It tastes like something that fell behind a couch and was later found by a dog. You thank him anyway. He nods sagely and declares, Cato ate cabbage daily. You believe him. You also suspect Cato may have suffered in silence. A group of construction workers nearby are sharing a pot of lentil stew. One adds in what looks like dried eel. Another sprinkles in a mystery powder from a pouch marked with a drawing of a goose. You make a note not to ask questions you're not prepared to have answered. Lunch in ancient Rome isn't about pleasure, it's about sustenance. Quick, filling, and unlikely to cause permanent harm, though that last part isn't guaranteed. For the working class, prandium is often cold leftovers. Bread, olives, cheese, dried fruits. You spot a man balancing a fig on his knee while arguing with his neighbour over whether the emperor's statue looks cross-eyed. Historians still argue whether lunch was a proper meal or just a snack between more important food events. Upper classes had the option of skipping it entirely or indulging in something light at home. The poor ate what they could, where they could, often on the go, and always within smelling distance of something on fire. You finish your mash and manage to trade the rest of your lard slice for a handful of wrinkled dates. They're sweet, sticky, and full of tiny surprises. One has a pit the size of a tooth. You check to make sure it's not your tooth. A mime performs nearby, juggling pebbles and pretending to choke. He's good. People laugh. Someone tosses him a boiled egg. He bows, catches it in his mouth, and promptly drops it. The crowd cheers anyway. You get up, brushing crumbs from your toga, and nearly knock over a basket of Lucanian sausages. The vendor glares. You bow. He doesn't bow back. And then, as you're attempting to make your escape, a loud voice erupts from behind a stall. A philosopher, perhaps, or just a loud man with opinions, is launching into a tirade about how chickpeas symbolize the decline of Roman virtue. A small crowd gathers. You try to edge away, but someone pulls you into a debate about whether boiled turnips are an acceptable dessert. You offer the diplomatic response of, "That's certainly a view." Eventually, you manage to exit the market square with your dignity mostly intact and a fig pit in your sandal. You're full enough not to collapse, still alert enough to recognize that garum has soaked into your sleeves. Again, Rome has fed you. Not well, not kindly, but thoroughly. And as the smell of boiled greens and roasted pigeon fades behind you, you whisper a silent thank you to your stomach for not staging a full rebellion. Yet, full, well, not starving, and garum streaked, you drift toward the forum, hoping for a moment of awe or at least shade. You've heard of this place, the heart of Roman public life, the grand piazza where senators debate, philosophers argue, and monuments gleam beneath the sun. Instead, you walk straight into an argument about cabbage tariffs. Two men are shouting at each other so passionately that you worry violence may erupt, or worse, that they'll ask you to weigh in. One is waving a ledger, the other is brandishing a leek like a dueling foil. A bystander chimes in with an opinion involving sheep taxes. A fourth man claims the real issue is goat displacement. Somewhere in there, your name is dragged into it. You try to edge away, but it's no use. You've been sucked into the gravitational pull of public rhetoric. This, it turns out, is the Roman Forum's primary fuel source. Not democracy, not legislation, but extremely loud people with very specific grievances. A vendor nearby is selling honey cakes and watching the chaos unfold with the glee of someone who knows this kind of drama brings foot traffic. He hands you a slightly squashed pastry in exchange for the last of your coins. It's warm, sticky, and distracts you long enough to be pulled into a secondary debate, this time about someone's cousin's goat chewing through a neighbor's tunic. You blink. How are goats everywhere in this city? Historians still argue whether the Forum functioned more as a political center or a civic circus. You suspect the answer is both. On one side, a senator is loudly quoting Cicero with the dramatic flair of a soap opera actor. On the other, a group of children is playing dice next to a man asleep under a statue of Romulus. Two women haggle over grape prices just beneath a graffiti-covered column. The graffiti reads, "Marcus is a donkey, and his mother makes bad soup." You find a quiet corner behind a defaced bust of Jupiter and try to sit. The marble is hot enough to fry a lark egg, so you half hover, half squat. Your toga, now firmly fused with your skin, threatens to unwrap itself with each fidget. You tighten it and mutter a prayer to whichever minor deity governs public decency. A small crowd gathers in the center of the square. A man with wild hair and even wilder eyes climbs atop a broken pedestal and begins shouting about the fall of moral values due to foreign figs. You can't tell if it's a satire or a campaign speech. People clap either way. Beside you, a group of scribes furiously record the event on wax tablets. One of them sneezes, smears his lines and swears creatively in Latin. Another rolls his eyes and says, "Just copy what Plautus said last week." You try to follow the speech, but it veers wildly. Philosophy, law, public health, and a brief detour into plumbing regulation. The speaker concludes by challenging the crowd to reclaim the republic, then trips on his toga and disappears behind a pillar. Applause anyway. The man next to you mutters, "Better than yesterday's speaker, at least this one didn't cry." Your attention is suddenly drawn to a living statue, a young man covered in white dust, frozen in a dramatic pose near the temple steps. Tourists toss him coins. A toddler pokes him. He doesn't flinch. You're impressed, until a bird lands on his head, and he finally breaks character, shouting profanities and stomping off. You're learning that the Forum is a place of business, certainly, but also one of performance. Romans come here not just to trade or litigate, but to witness, argue, declare, and gossip. You overhear two matrons discussing a neighbour's scandalous affair with a fishmonger. A man in purple robes denies being drunk while trying to buy 3 pigeons with a carved spoon. As you shuffle toward a nearby shrine, trying to avoid further goat-based entanglements, you nearly trip over a philosopher seated cross-legged on the ground, eyes closed. You apologize. He opens one eye and says, "All is fleeting." You nod, unsure if that means you're forgiven or cursed. A child runs past, trailing a string tied to a wooden turtle. His father follows, shouting something about imperial, discipline. A passing merchant insists you sample his fermented radish. You decline and immediately regret engaging. You lean against a column, grateful for the brief illusion of stillness. The Forum hums around you like a hive. Chaotic, hot, scented faintly of thyme and warm limestone. A senator's speech echoes in the distance, praising the resilience of Roman plumbing, while a nearby donkey attempts to eat a toga hanging from a vendor's stall. You take one last bite of your honey cake and try to imagine how any of this could have functioned as the administrative nerve center of a vast empire, but somehow it did. Messy, loud, glorious. You sneeze. Someone blesses you. Another accuses you of offending Jupiter by sneezing near the altar. You sigh. Of course. You did, of course. You make a tactical retreat from the Forum, weaving between marble pillars and marching orators in search of something quieter, something with fewer goats and fewer accusations of impiety. But as fate, or possibly Mercury, god of mischief, would have it, you wander straight into the open arms of Rome's greatest street-level danger, entertainment. A commotion draws your attention down a side alley. Laughter, clapping, and the distinct sound of a tambourine being shaken with the energy of someone who's either deeply passionate or deeply caffeinated. You round a corner and find yourself in the middle of a puppet show. The puppets are crude, their strings tangled, their faces stuck in permanent expressions of alarm and constipation. One wears a laurel wreath made of wilted leaves, another has a wooden sword. The performance is either a satire of Julius Caesar or an aggressively interpretive cooking demonstration. You can't quite tell. Children scream with delight. Adults laugh too, though some with the strained expression of people pretending this is absolutely hilarious. One puppet falls over. The crowd cheers. You smile, distracted, charmed. And that's when you realize your coin pouch is gone. You spin around, startled. No one's looking at you. Everyone's focused on the drama unfolding on stage, where a puppet has begun vomiting what looks like dyed wool. Is this part of the show? Does it matter? Meanwhile, your stomach drops faster than Caesar on the Ides of March. You pat your sides, your sash, the folds of your toga. Nothing. Someone has performed the most time-honored Roman sleight of hand, pickpocketing, during distraction. Historians still debate the scale of urban crime in ancient Rome, but surviving records make one thing clear. The Forum may have been the beating heart of the city, but the alleyways were its pickpocket-infested intestines. You dash forward and whisper to a bystander, "Someone stole my purse." He shrugs. "You must be new." As if to console you, a man with no shoes and too many teeth offers you a chicken. "Trained to sniff out thieves," he says proudly. You don't question it. You let him place the chicken in your arms. It clucks, judgmentally. Moments later, it pecks you. You gently set it down and back away. The chicken wanders off, possibly in pursuit of justice. Or a beetle. You stagger into a nearby stall, where a seller is juggling colourful glass balls and humming a tune with no recognizable rhythm. "Lose something?" he asks, without stopping. The routine. "Yes," you say. "Everything." He winks. "That's Rome, friend." You attempt to return to the street but are intercepted by a group of street musicians. Flute, lyre, hand drum, One man plays two instruments at once, none of them in tune. They block your path and start performing what they claim is a traditional Etruscan wedding song. It sounds like an argument between bagpipes and a goose. A small girl with silver bangles dances in a circle, twirling and laughing. You offer her your only remaining possession, a plum you were saving for emergencies. She accepts it with grace and immediately throws it at a wall. Artistic expression, probably. You break free and duck into a shadowy colonnade, catching your breath. And then a juggler drops one of his props, a goat skull, directly onto your foot. He apologizes, bows deeply, and hands you a flyer for his one-man show. It's about Saturnalia and heartbreak, he whispers. You limp away, dignity crumbling like stale flatbread. Street performers in Rome are everywhere. Jugglers, actors, musicians, mime troupes, fortune tellers, and people who dress up as minor. Deities and scream at passing tourists. They operate in a legal grey zone, technically tolerated, occasionally celebrated, frequently ignored. Some earn decent coin, others earn tomatoes to the face. You sit on a cracked step and look around. A mime is pretending to be a statue pretending to be a mime. A boy is pretending to be a wolf. A man dressed as a satyr is arguing with an actual goat. You spot your own reflection in a puddle and barely recognize the garum-scented, toga-tangled figure blinking back, and still no sign of your money. You consider shouting, "Stop, thief!" But who would listen? Everyone would just assume it's part of another performance. Instead, you sigh, remove your sandal to shake out a rock, and discover a crushed fig from earlier. You eat it. It tastes like resignation and dirt. A kindly old woman sees you and pats your hand. "Lost something, dear?" You nod. "Don't worry," she says. "You'll lose much more before the day is out." Comforting. As the sun slips a little lower, you rise, brush yourself off, and start moving again. One step poorer, slightly bruised, and now with a suspicious chicken following you from a polite distance. Rome, you realize, doesn't just overwhelm you with architecture or politics. It performs at you, all day, constantly, loudly, and sometimes it steals your wallet while doing so. After the incident with the puppet show, the pickpocket, and the chicken with questionable detective skills, you limp away, searching for sanctuary. Not emotional, not metaphorical. You want a literal sanctuary. Somewhere with shade, quiet, and ideally, no jugglers, goats, or fermented anything. A temple, perhaps. You spot one near the edge of the forum, a grand columned structure dedicated to what appears to be Minerva, goddess of wisdom, strategy, and probably overdue vengeance. You approach, hopeful. The steps are cool beneath your aching feet. The doorway yawns wide and dark, promising relief from heat, noise, and your mounting list of personal failings. Inside, it's dim, solemn. The light filters through slits in the ceiling, creating shafts of dusty illumination that make everything look noble and important. A statue of Minerva stands tall, eyes stern, helmet on, owl at her feet. You nod to her, grateful for the moment of stillness. Then you sneeze. Not dramatically, just a small, polite sneeze, though unfortunately timed, to coincide with a priest mid-chant and a woman mid-offering. Everything stops. The priest lowers his arms. The woman freezes, incense stick hovering in mid-air. A child gasps audibly. Someone hisses, "Ill omen." You try to explain. "I just dust." You gesture at the light, the air, your clearly human respiratory system. But no. It's too late. You've sneezed near the altar. Historians still debate how seriously Romans took omens from bodily functions. Some sources suggest sneezing could be auspicious, if done on the right side, at the right time, by the right person. You are none of these things. The priest marches over. He is bald, robed, and smells like burnt myrrh and authority. "This is a sacred space," he says. You apologize, again, profusely, You even offer a small stone as a makeshift votive. He does not seem impressed. The woman begins a cleansing ritual to counteract your sneeze. She waves sage, sprinkles something that smells like vinegar and betrayal, and mutters a chant that sounds suspiciously like she's cursing your family line. You take a cautious step backward. Your sandal squeaks. A boy nearby whispers to his friend, "He's definitely cursed now." They nod solemnly. One makes the sign against evil spirits. You're not sure what it means, but you copy it anyway, just to be safe. You try to exit the temple with dignity. You fail. Your toga snags on a candlestick, drags it a foot, and topples an offering bowl filled with what you hope was symbolic wheat. Everyone gasps. You bow and flee, accidentally knocking over a basket of apples on your way out. They scatter down the temple steps like divine marbles. You run until you can't anymore, ducking into a small shrine tucked between two bakeries. It's dedicated to Laras, household spirits who seem far less judgmental. There's a figurine wearing a hat and holding a cornucopia. You light a tiny oil lamp and whisper an apology to all gods, known and unknown. Feeling marginally less hexed, you rejoin the street, trying to blend into the crowd. You pass other temples, one for Venus, crowded with hopeful lovers and anxious parents, another for Saturn, where someone appears to be sacrificing a cabbage while chanting something in verse. A woman beckons you toward a shady enclosure. "Come offer thanks to the fertility spirits," she says with a smile that makes you nervous. You decline, blaming indigestion. And just when you think the day can't get stranger, you spot a procession. Robed figures, chanting, walking slowly, down the road. One carries a wooden mask, another swings a censer. People kneel as they pass. You copy them, when in Rome. As they move by, you hear the murmured name of Bacchus, god of wine and revelry. One of the robed figures is giggling. Another trips. Someone in the back is clearly drunk. You suddenly suspect this may not be an official ritual. You back away discreetly. Romans had gods for everything. Big ones, small ones, ones for thresholds, drains, and even mildew. And you're starting to suspect that every time you sneeze, trip, or mispronounce forum, at least one of them notices and writes it down. You pass a wall covered in faded graffiti. Most of it is political insults or romantic declarations, but one reads, "I angered the gods, my bread burned." Coincidence? You feel a deep kinship with whoever wrote that. As you rest near a statue of Janus, god of doorways and beginnings, you reflect on how religion in Rome isn't just part of life. It is life. It governs decisions, shapes rituals, and provides an ever-watchful backdrop to even the simplest sneeze. You exhale slowly. The sun is lower now, casting golden light across the marble. Bells ring in the distance. Pigeons coo from a rooftop. A child drops a fig. Peace for just a moment. And then, someone nearby coughs. 3 people immediately knock on wood, throw salt, and spit over their shoulders. You do the same. You've learned. Still slightly twitchy from your temple misstep, and now sporting what may or may not be the lingering aura of a divine hex, you wander toward the edge of a marketplace. There's a low wooden sign swinging gently in the breeze, painted with a crooked red cross and the words Curatio et Concilium, which roughly translates to healing and advice, or more honestly, let's try something and hope for the best. You're here because you've developed a cough, a dry, persistent one, probably from the smoke, dust, vinegar-scented temple herbs, and whatever was lurking in that communal bath steam. A young boy offers to take you to the local medicus, a Roman doctor. You imagine a quiet room with herbs and poultices. Instead, you're ushered into what looks like someone's tool shed. Hanging on the wall is a collection of terrifying instruments, long metal probes, curved knives, and something that looks suspiciously like a meat hook. The physician, named Gaius, greets you while balancing a bowl of lukewarm lentils on his knee. "Cough?" he asks. You nod. He taps your chest with 2 fingers, listens thoughtfully, then reaches into a jar labeled Vulpes Sanguis. You don't ask. You've learned not to. Leeches first, he declares. You try to object, but it's already happening. A jar is opened. A leech plops onto your arm with the enthusiasm of someone clocking in for a night shift. It starts sucking. Immediately. Gaius nods approvingly. Yes, yes. That'll draw out the bad humours. He then sprinkles a powder across your shoulders. It smells like garlic, clay, and desperation. This is crushed mouse bone. Very effective, he says, as if this were a universally understood truth. You make the mistake of asking what happens if the cough doesn't improve. Then we apply a poultice of boiled onions and goose grease, possibly insert a reed through the nose to drain the sinuses. You stop asking questions. Historians still argue whether Roman medicine helped more than it harmed. There were undoubtedly brilliant physicians, anatomical studies, surgical innovations. But for every Galen, there were 10 Gaiuses, armed with confidence, a jar of bugs, and 0 scruples. Another patient walks in holding his toe. It's swollen and purple. Gaius glances at it, shrugs, and suggests amputation with a hot blade. The man agrees without blinking. You excuse yourself politely before the procedure begins. Outside, you lean against a pillar, one arm dotted with leech hickeys, wondering if you're now healthier or just emotionally numb. The young boy reappears and offers you a piece of dried apple. You accept. It tastes fine until you notice a hint of garlic. You try not to read into it. Nearby, a woman selling herbal bundles waves you over. She claims her dried marjoram and myrtle sachets can cure anything from melancholy to indigestion. You purchase one just to feel like you're doing something. She tells you to tie it to your ankle and whisper the name of your mother 3 times during sunset. You nod and promise to try. You pass a chalkboard listing available treatments at a neighbouring healer's stall. Sprains, snake oil and goat, hair bandages, insomnia, lettuce juice or a mild beating, toothache, burn the nerve with a hot nail, unspecified feelings of dread, drink wine until unconscious. You opt for the last one. A vendor nearby offers a strong mulled wine, spiced with cinnamon and what he swears is imported saffron. It tastes like fire and old raisins. You feel better, or at least fuzzier. You slump onto a bench, watching as a line of patients files into another medical tent. A sign reads Cures of the East, with a picture of a man wrestling a snake. A woman emerges holding a jar of something that might be honey or bee vomit. She looks confused, but hopeful. Roman medicine, you realize, is part science, part superstition, and part sheer guessing. They don't separate health from the divine. A good outcome is seen as divine favor. A bad outcome, fate. You either recover or you're meant to die. Clean, inescapable logic. You recall someone mentioning that one common treatment for sore throats was to wear a dead mole around the neck. You wonder if it's too late to try that. Probably. Moles are fast. The leech marks on your arm begin to itch. You apply a damp cloth, which makes them itch more. A passing woman suggests rubbing on crushed oyster shell. Another says you should bury a small token under a laurel bush. A third whispers something about a sacred chicken. You thank them all, then quietly slink away. By the time you make it back to a main road, the cough has subsided slightly, either due to the wine, the leech, or your body giving up entirely. You've survived a Roman doctor's visit with all your limbs, your dignity moderately dented, and your blood volume slightly reduced. And for that, you consider yourself lucky. The sun is sinking low over the rooftops of Rome now, painting everything in warm amber and turning dust motes into golden confetti. You've stumbled, limped, and sweat your way through the eternal city. And as the shadows lengthen, something unexpected happens. You receive an invitation. It's from Lucius, of course, your occasional host, toga rescuer, and the only man who still believes in your ability to survive a full day here. He waves you over with a grin. Come, he says, you're joining us for dinner. Dinner, the great Roman meal, cena. Not a crust of bread under a bench, not a single plum eaten while dodging chickens, but an actual sit-down, multi-course, socially fraught Roman banquet. You nod. Because what else is there to do? You follow him, your toga clinging in damp folds, your sandals now vaguely edible from so much garum exposure. Lucius leads you into a modest domus, not one of the palatial estates you've heard about, but a respectable home with painted walls, oil lamps, and the faint smell of roasted something wafting from the back. His wife, Flavia, greets you with a kiss to each cheek, and the practiced warmth of a woman who's hosted many dinners and expects you not to break anything. The triclinium, the dining room, is already set. Low couches surround a central table, candles flicker in iron holders. A mural of Neptune rides a chariot across the far wall, looking vaguely disappointed in everyone. You're shown to a couch and told to recline, on your left elbow, feet outstretched. This is harder than it sounds. You flop into position with all the grace of a dropped ham. The others arrange themselves fluidly, like they've been doing this their whole lives. They have. The first course arrives. It's gustatio, the appetizer. Olives, hard-boiled quail eggs, radishes carved to look like flowers, and a small bowl of pickled dormice. You politely ignore the dormice. Lucius doesn't. He picks one up by the tail and pops it into his mouth like a sugared grape. Crispy, he says cheerfully. You smile, nod. Try the olive instead. It is mercifully just an olive. Wine flows, diluted with water in accordance with Roman custom. Drinking it straight is for barbarians and poets. Your cup is refilled constantly, your plate rearranged by a servant with the stealth of a ghost. The pace is slow, deliberate, meant to stretch across hours. Next comes the prima mensa, the main course. There's roast pork dressed in honey and herbs, stuffed dormice again. You swear one winked at you. And a platter of fish covered in a complex sauce that smells like half the market you visited earlier. There's also a dish of boiled lettuce, which is apparently thought to induce sleep and calm passions. You eat it by the fistful. Conversation meanders. Topics include the quality of last month's fig harvest, which neighbour has been caught importing illicit Egyptian wine, and whether or not comets are personal insults from the gods. Lucius tells a story about a man who sneezed in the forum and accidentally triggered a riot. You do not mention your own sneeze incident. Then someone begins reciting poetry. This is the moment you've been warned about. It's a long piece. Dramatic. Possibly erotic. Definitely over-enunciated. The poet is a friend of Lucius, and he gazes into the middle distance like he's communing with the muses. Everyone nods politely. You do too. You have no idea what's happening. At one point, there's a metaphor involving geese and destiny. You drink more wine. Dessert arrives. Nuts, dates stuffed with almonds, pastries soaked in honey, and a dish called libum, which tastes like cheesecake if cheesecake had been invented in a bakery run by bees. It's incredible. You try not to cry while eating it. Lucius claps his hands. A flute player enters. He begins playing a tune that sounds vaguely like a goat sneezing in rhythm. People hum along. The wine gets stronger. The room gets louder. Someone challenges another guest to a riddle contest. You pretend to choke on a walnut to avoid participating. You recline on your couch, stomach full, brain fuzzy, and wonder if this is what survival feels like. You haven't tripped, been accused of sacrilege, or been pecked by poultry in at least an hour. And yet, banquets, even small ones, aren't just about eating. They're about social status, where you sit, what you wear, how well you handle your wine. All of it sends messages. Lucius has placed you at a respectable couch, but not the best one. You're between a merchant who won't stop talking about grain tariffs and a woman who smells faintly of myrrh and judgment. You're being tested. Historians still debate the exact etiquette of Roman dining. Who reclines, who doesn't, whether women were allowed, what utensils were used. But one thing is certain. Dinner was performance, theatre, and you, friend, are stumbling your way through Act 3. The poet finally finishes his 10th verse. The room exhales. Someone starts clapping. You follow suit, too enthusiastically. A bowl of dates tips and scatters across the mosaic floor. You apologize. Flavia waves it off. It's good luck, she lies. By the end, you're full beyond reason. Your toga feels like it's trying to digest you. Lucius slaps your back and says, "You did well. You ate like a Roman." You thank him. You do not tell him you're now slightly afraid of lettuce, slightly afraid of... The banquet winds down slowly, the way rivers do before they empty into the sea. Bellies are full. Faces are flushed. The air is thick with wine, roasted herbs, and the faint burnt undertone of someone's scorched toga hem. You rise, gingerly, from the couch, limbs stiff and brain gently lapping at the edge of sleepy confusion. Lucius pats your shoulder, says something about tomorrow's plans involving a mosaic exhibition and possibly a cousin with a lion, and vanishes toward a side corridor with theatrical flourish. You step out into the night air. Roman evenings are not tranquil, not in the way you hoped. The coolness is a relief, yes, but the city is still very much alive. In fact, it's only now beginning its second shift. You head back toward the insula where you're lodging. On the way, you're serenaded by a trio of drunk men harmonizing a song about someone named Claudia and her betrayal via lentils. They're loud, off-key, and passionate. 3 traits shared by many Romans, it seems. As you round a corner, you see a pottery fight in progress. You stop. 2 women are shouting across a balcony. Below, a man ducks as a terracotta pitcher sails past his head and explodes against a wall. A small group gathers to cheer, place bets, and occasionally duck shrapnel. Someone declares, "She's got a better aim than last week." Another adds, "It was a chamber pot then." You pick up the pace. The streets are lit not by torches, but by lamps mounted on walls or held by servants. Pools of yellow light flicker across the cobblestones. Shadows loom large, stretching across alleyways where rats, cats, and at least one semi-retired pickpocket go about their nocturnal business. You pass a tavern, its door open to reveal a crowd of patrons singing loudly. Inside, spilled wine, bad dice games, arguments about gladiators, and a man playing dice with a chicken. The chicken wins. Nobody questions it. A youth dashes past you, grinning, a stolen basket of flatbread under one arm. An old man gives half-hearted chase, then shrugs and resumes his drink. You keep going. Surely your bed is near, and then it begins. The noise, a flute in one direction, a tambourine in another, the jangle of jewelry, laughter, yelling, someone trying to recite Virgil in a hiccup-ridden voice. It is as if all of Rome refuses to sleep, and insists you shouldn't either. Children still play, their games echoing off the stone. One jumps, out at you from behind a pillar, cackles and runs off. You try to laugh. It sounds like a sigh. You finally reach your insula, your apartment building, only to find someone arguing in the stairwell. A man is blocking the way, arms crossed, demanding that his upstairs neighbor return a missing amphora. The accused yells back that the amphora was already cracked, and also ugly. A third voice joins in, insisting the amphora was stolen by a monkey. You consider climbing in through the window. You don't. You wait. Eventually, the monkey theory derails the entire argument, and the way clears. You climb the steps. Each one creaks with a sound that suggests termites, or perhaps divine judgment. You pass a door cracked open to reveal 2 elderly men playing a board game involving pebbles and a disturbingly lifelike doll. You pretend not to notice. At your floor, someone's cooking fish. Again, always fish. The scent seeps through the walls like a very specific haunting. You open your door and enter the small musty room you've been loaned for the night. It has straw bedding, a cracked jug of water, and a flickering lamp that may or may not contain actual oil. You sit, you exhale, and then, through the wall, a couple begins to argue. Loudly, passionately. You learn more about their relationship in 5 minutes than you know about your own family. The words fly. Plates fly. A dog barks. Someone begins to cry. You pull your cloak over your head like a makeshift barrier against human emotion. The floor above creaks with footsteps. The floor below emits laughter and what may be goat noises. You don't ask. You don't care. You lie on your mat, listening to the city buzz, sputter, shout, sigh. Historians still argue whether Rome truly slept. Some say it slowed to a crawl. Others insist it simply shifted gears. What you've learned is that night is a different flavour of chaos. Not quieter, just darker and slightly drunker. You close your eyes. Something explodes nearby. It's probably just a wine jug or an olive lamp or your own sanity. You drift. Kind of. Just as sleep begins to tug at your frayed brain, someone outside yells, "The moon is angry." You whisper, "So am I." The chicken from earlier walks by your window. You don't question it. You wake at some blurry midpoint between midnight and dawn, not because you're well rested, far from it, but because someone is chanting. It starts low, rhythmic, almost musical. You think maybe it's just another drunk serenading the moon, again. But as it grows louder, it becomes clear this isn't aimless drunkenness. It's too coordinated, too reverent, too incense-heavy. You shuffle to the window and peer out, squinting past the flickering torchlight. A group of people in hooded robes are moving slowly through the alley. One holds a bundle of dried herbs smouldering at one end. Another is cradling what looks like a loaf of bread wrapped in red ribbon. Someone's softly banging a tambourine, but in a mournful way. Lucius appears behind you, bleary-eyed. "Ah," he says, "you've met the neighbours." "Who are they?" you whisper. He yawns. "One of the mystery cults. Don't ask which. They change names every few weeks. Sometimes they worship Isis, sometimes Bacchus. One time I think it was a horse." You blink. "They invited me to a thing yesterday. They said it was harmless." Lucius shrugs. "It usually is. At first. Too late. You're already halfway, dressed and following them down the street. Because what else do you have left to lose? Dignity? Gone. Toga? Halfway to compost. Your soul. Maybe a refundable deposit. You join the procession at the edge, not wanting to look too eager. A woman with painted eyebrows nods at you. "You've been chosen," she says. You smile awkwardly. That seems premature. The group winds its way toward a low building on the Aventine Hill. By the time you reach the door, someone has painted a spiral on your forehead in what smells like wine and possibly beetroot. You try not to react. Inside, low ceilings, heavy drapery, dozens of lamps. Smoke coils in the air like gossip. The room pulses with soft drum beats. Everyone begins to chant, "Yo! Yo!" followed by words in a language that may not be Latin or may just be very rural Latin. You sit. A loaf of bread is passed around. You're told to kiss it. You do. It tastes like rosemary and worry. Then comes the ritual dance. Cloaks are thrown. Off, revealing tunics, not nudity, thankfully. And the group forms a circle, stomping rhythmically while chanting something about the womb of the vine and the wings of the snake. You join in, copying the movements, just slightly behind the beat. No one seems to care. They're either very accepting or extremely distracted. Historians still debate the actual content of these mystery cult rituals. They were, after all, mysteries, deliberately obscure to outsiders. But common themes emerge: death, rebirth, wine, initiation, and occasionally goats. Always goats. After several laps around the circle, everyone collapses onto cushions. A man with kohl-rimmed eyes tells a story about a man who turned into a fig tree after staring into a well. The room nods solemnly. You do too. Wine is served. Again, you've stopped counting. Then comes the final trial. You're blindfolded. Hands guide you gently into a smaller room where something is placed in your lap. It's soft, and squirming. You lift the blindfold slightly. A snake. A very real, very calm snake. You try not to squeak. A voice whispers, "Name it," or it names you. You panic. "Claudius," you say. There's a pause, then applause. Someone pats your head. You are now part of the spiral. You have no idea what that means, but you feel strangely proud. The snake is taken back. You're handed a token, a small carved crescent moon, and told to keep it hidden always. You nod, because what else do you do after accidentally joining a cult at 2 a.m.? The ceremony ends with everyone humming a single note while sipping a final draught of honeyed wine. Someone snores. You slip out, token in hand, spiral smudged across your forehead, heart pounding with confusion and an odd sense of accomplishment. Outside, the city is nearly quiet, just the sound of distant sandals on stone, the flap of laundry in the wind, and the occasional owl hooting as if judging your life choices. You walk home in a daze. The stars are fading. A rooster crows half-heartedly. Back in your borrowed room, Lucius raises one eyebrow. "Did you come back with all your organs?" You check. "Yes," you say. He shrugs. "Then you're doing better than I did on my first cult night." You lie down. You stare at the ceiling. You think about the snake, about Claudius, about how nobody warned you that Roman religion included light choreography and surprise reptiles. And as sleep finally drags you under, one thought floats through your mind. You are definitely cursed now. You wake to a drip on your forehead, a slow, methodical, uncaring drip. It's either rain or something far more sinister leaking from the ceiling. You sit up and squint at the sagging plaster above your mat. A hairline crack snakes its way across like a prophecy in progress. You press a finger against the wall. It crumbles slightly. Another drip lands squarely on your shoulder. You take that as a sign to get out. Lucius greets you at the doorway with a cheerful, "Sleep well, moon priest," and hands you what he claims is a breakfast cake. It's stale. You chew thoughtfully while watching a tile slide off the roof 2 buildings down and shatter in the street. A pedestrian steps around the pieces without blinking. "Was that supposed to happen?" you ask. Lucius just shrugs. "Welcome to Roman architecture." Your building creaks, possibly in greeting, possibly in surrender. Roman insulae, those charming multi-story apartment blocks, are famous for 3 things: being cheaply built, dangerously tall, and extremely fond of collapsing. There are laws on the books regulating their construction, but these are mostly treated as inspirational reading. Most landlords, including the ever-thrifty Sextus, prefer shortcuts and divine hope over sturdy materials. As you descend the stairs, 2 men are arguing about cracks in the foundation. One insists it's fine, the other insists the building tilted a little overnight. You look around. The floor does seem slightly askew. A cup rolls from one corner to another without encouragement. You quicken your pace. Outside, it's drizzling. The rainwater trickles along the gutters, washing stray olive pits and fig skins into the gutters. Children sail wax tablet scraps down the street like boats. One tips his toward you and yells, "The flood comes for us all." You give him a respectful nod. He gets it. You dodge under an awning, just in time to avoid a second tile crash. This time, it lands on a goose. The goose is fine. The tile is not. Lucius appears beside you. "I once lived in a building where the entire 4th floor slid into the forum during dinner." "Anyone hurt?" you ask. "Just the dessert," he says gravely. There's a growing crowd now, all staring up at your building with that collective Roman expression that hovers somewhere between admiration and horror. Someone points out the crack in the wall. Another says they saw smoke. A third is selling roasted walnuts from a tray balanced on his head. Suddenly, there's a tremor. Not an earthquake necessarily, but a groan from the structure, like an old man reconsidering his life. The upper floor shudders. You hear something fall inside. Probably furniture. Hopefully not Flavia. A group of neighbors starts chanting, "Aedes vacua," Aedes vacua. Empty the house, which is either a legal precaution or a fun way to start a riot. Sextus appears, waving a stick and yelling about exaggeration and slander. The building immediately drops a chunk of plaster behind him. Historians still argue whether Roman architects fully understood stress distribution in multi-story dwellings. You're confident at least this one didn't. A passerby notes, "At least it's not on fire." Someone else spits for luck. Just then, a city official wanders by. He's dressed in robes slightly too clean for someone who works in housing enforcement. The crowd points, gestures, waves. He looks up, looks down, and announces, "It's only dangerous if it rains." "It is raining," someone says. He nods sagely. "Then pray." He walks off. A dog barks from inside the building. A cat yowls back. The upper floor creaks like an opera singer clearing her throat. You step farther back. Suddenly, the very wall behind your room detaches and collapses into the street, with a sound like Jupiter flipping a table. Dust billows everywhere. The crowd gasps. A chicken sprints out from the rubble like it's late for a second cult meeting. Sextus throws his arms up and shouts, "You see? Still structurally sound." No one believes him. A boy throws a radish. At the debris, you decide it's time to move out. Rome is beautiful. Rome is powerful. Rome is falling apart brick by unreliable brick. You gather your things, which amount to a half-crushed crescent amulet, a threadbare cloak, and a very judgmental piece of bread, and begin wandering in search of alternate lodging. Someone suggests sleeping under a bridge, but warns you about the ghosts of unpaid labourers. Someone else says the Temple of Diana has a decent awning. You pause on a street corner, soaking wet, plaster dusted, pondering how it's entirely possible that this day has started worse than yesterday, and yesterday involved a snake, a goat, and an involuntary vow of spiritual rebirth. You sneeze again. A woman crossing herself mutters, "Not near the bakery." You keep walking, because Rome may be eternal, but its buildings are not. You've been wandering for a while now, wet, weary, and carrying the emotional weight of a man whose apartment just tried to kill him. The city around you, meanwhile, continues as if nothing happened. Because in Rome, nothing ever really stops. Buildings fall, streets flood, snakes get names. But the bread still bakes, the senators still lie, and people still argue about olives. You're almost ready to give up and nap in a hay cart when a voice calls out behind you. "Hey, you there!" You turn, slowly. It's a man with elaborate sandals, a clipboard made of wax, and a deeply suspicious expression. "You there," he repeats, stepping closer. "You were heard yesterday saying something about the emperor's olives taste like betrayal." You blink. You may have said something along those lines, possibly at the puppet show, possibly after your coin pouch vanished. But still, what? He pulls out a tiny tablet and flips it open. "Name?" "I'm not from here," you say quickly. "Obviously," he replies. "Tunic's too short, accent's odd, and you smell like old garum and burnt mouse fur." You try to smile. "That's a medical thing." He's not amused. "Do you know," he says, "that criticizing imperial food preferences is considered a breach of dignity law? At best, slander. At worst, treason adjacent." You open your mouth to protest, but he raises a finger. "We take our olives very seriously in this district." You're suddenly aware of how many people are watching. A small group has gathered. Someone already whispering, "He insulted the emperor's condiments." The man eyes you, tapping his stylus against the wax. "Let's say you didn't mean it. Let's say it was a joke." "It was a very bad joke," you say, nodding emphatically. "Do you have witnesses who can testify that you're merely foolish and not subversive?" You freeze. Lucius is gone. Flavia would only testify that you ate lettuce like a man possessed. The chicken has moved on. The snake's name was Claudius. You are, in short, alone. You try a new tactic. Wait, I'm under divine protection. He raises an eyebrow. I was initiated last night, you continue, fumbling in your cloak and pulling out the crescent-shaped token from your unexpected cult experience. The spiral. I have, serpentine blessings. There's a long pause. Then, unbelievably, his face changes. Just a flicker. Caution, respect, fear. He steps back slightly. You're one of them? You nod solemnly. Yes. The moon favors me. Another pause. Then, slowly, he closes his tablet. Well, he says, brushing dust from his tunic. Carry on. And just like that, you're free. He vanishes into the crowd, leaving behind only the faint scent of bureaucratic ink and personal vendetta. You stagger backward, lean against a column, and try to steady your breathing. A woman nearby offers you a fig. That was quick thinking, she says. You nod. Do you think he believed me? She shrugs. Enough not to arrest you. In Rome, that's practically a blessing. The rest of the day is a blur. You avoid officials. You speak only in compliments. You nod at every statue of the emperor, like you've just remembered a hilarious story he once told. You visit a temple, light a candle, and thank every god whose name you remember. Janus, Minerva, Mercury, the Lares, the nuns, the Ides. Everyone gets a mention. Even the sacred chickens. Especially the sacred chickens. At one point, you consider fleeing the city, but you don't know the roads. You don't have food. You're still not sure where the sun sets here. And besides, Rome has its hooks in you. You find a quiet alley. You sit on a low wall. You breathe. And then, because it's Rome and nothing is ever truly quiet, a man starts yelling about a missing loaf. A goat runs by. A child throws a stone into a cartwheel. The stone ricochets, hits a statue, and the statue's arm falls off. Someone blames you. You hold up your hands. Not me. I'm blessed by the spiral, the crowd murmurs, and backs away. You can't help it. You laugh. A dry, wheezing, slightly maniacal laugh. You've survived nearly an entire day in ancient Rome. You've been yelled at, pickpocketed, leech-treated, cult-initiated, almost arrested, and nearly crushed by your own apartment. But you're still standing, barely. And now, at long last, you find yourself staggering toward the city gates, your sandals are frayed, your tunic damp, your toga dragging behind you like a surrender flag. You smell like smoke, vinegar, and mystery soup. Your arm still bears the faint imprint of leech dentistry. You are, in the truest Roman sense, a citizen of the streets, though nobody seems interested in giving you any actual rights. You didn't set out to escape Rome. You simply kept walking, past the Forum, past the shuttered bathhouses, past the man selling pickled eggs beside a collapsed statue of Mars, and somehow your feet brought you here, to the Porta Capena, one of the great gates leading out of the city. You stop beneath its towering arch. The moon is up. The torches flicker. A few guards lean against spears, looking monumentally bored. You approach, trying to seem casual. They eye your torn cloak, your half-wrapped toga, your wild eyes, and your cult token, which you've now tied to your belt for good luck or mild intimidation. One guard squints. Leaving the city, are you? You nod. Yes, I, need a change of air. He looks unconvinced. You got papers? You freeze. Then remember that Rome runs on bribes, not bureaucracy. You pull out the remaining half of your honey cake, slightly squashed but still fragrant. You offer it with solemnity. He shrugs, takes it, and waves you on. That's it. You're outside the walls. You take a few shaky steps down the Via Appia, the great Roman road stretching out like a promise, or a dare. The city behind you groans and twinkles, its smoke curling upward, its walls echoing with the constant thrum of sandals, laughter, argument, and chamber pots. For a brief moment, the countryside yawns before you. Fields, hills, the faint bark of a dog in the distance. You breathe deeply. The air is different here, lighter, less saturated with goat. But of course, you're not out of danger. There are bandits, they say, and wolves, and worst of all, Romans with country villas who believe you're there to prune their hedges. You sit on a rock beside the road. Your feet ache. Your knees have filed complaints. Your stomach's unsure if it's hungry or just remembering the mouse paste from lunch. You watch a cart rumble past, drawn by a donkey who seems as done with life as you are, and that's when the questions begin to sneak in. Could you survive another day in Rome? Should you go back? Would they even notice you were gone? Or would they build a tavern over your mat and keep going? You glance down at your sandal, still crusted with fish sauce from the bathhouse incident. A reminder of how far you've come, or fallen. Rome chewed you up, swirled you in its marble blender of bureaucracy, architecture, and deeply personal hygiene rituals, and spat you out at the gate. And yet, you miss it already. Because in its chaos, its smells, its scams, its scandals, and its late-night goat chants, Rome is somehow very much alive. And you, by some miracle, still are too. You look over your shoulder. The city pulses, red and gold, steam rising from rooftops, laughter echoing through archways. A woman is yelling at a fig vendor. A dog is barking at a mime. Somewhere, a gladiator's being serenaded by an extremely off-key flute. You sigh, you stand up, and you begin the slow walk back toward the gate. Because you may not be built for Rome. But Rome, oh, it was built to test exactly your kind. The kind that walks away and still turns around. And now, as the dust settles on your day in ancient Rome, let's slow our pace just a little. Let your breath deepen. Let your shoulders soften. And allow the distant sounds of chariot wheels and forum quarrels to fade like echoes in a dream. You've done enough. You've survived cracked walls and chanting cults, arguing neighbours, dodgy, fish sauce, and conversations you didn't ask for with people you'll never forget. You've stepped through steaming bathhouses, slipped across ancient paving stones, and been folded, quite badly, into a toga designed to confuse rather than clothe. You've heard the city hum and stutter, smelled its age, tasted its strangeness. You've felt its chaos wrap around you, not cruelly, but curiously, like a place constantly daring you to laugh at how impossible it all is. Because Rome doesn't apologize for being Rome, it just is. And that is somehow more honest than you expected. So now, wherever you are, tucked in bed, lights dimmed, maybe the soft whir of a fan nearby, just let your thoughts drift. Picture the moon over the rooftops of the eternal city. Picture a fig cart rolling gently down the street. Picture a tired Roman chicken settling in for the night beside a half-finished poem etched into a wall. And picture yourself there too, not as a tourist anymore, but as a survivor, a sneezing, sandal-losing, honey cake bartering survivor. Sleep now, dear traveller. Rome can wait.